Mesopotamia. It's like, wow, just saying it out loud, it sounds so ancient, right? Like the foundation of something big. But maybe you're sitting there thinking, okay, why should I even care about what happened thousands of years ago between a couple of rivers I can barely pronounce?
It's a fair question.
It is. But get this, and I'm serious, get ready for a surprise. Because when we take this deep dive into Mesopotamia, the so-called Cradle of Civilization, we're going to see how they laid the groundwork for some seriously fundamental stuff that affects you and me right now. We're talking about the origins of our legal system, like where it all began.
And organized agriculture.
Yep, there were pioneers there too.
Oh, yeah. And even how we communicate, even the way we talk to each other can be traced back to them.
It's kind of mind-blowing, right?
It really is.
Yeah.
And that's what makes this deep dive so exciting. We're not just going to be digging through dusty old relics. We're going to explore the profound and honestly often shocking impact Mesopotamia had on, well, everything. So we'll journey through their history, meet the big players like the Sumerians, Akkadians, Babylonians, and Assyrians, and we'll really pinpoint those crucial innovations that emerged from this region. And we're going to be relying on our sources every step of the way to bring you the most important insights and some really unbelievable facts about Mesopotamia's lasting legacy. It's a legacy that affects you, the listener, directly.
Okay, so let's start with the basics. Where exactly are we? We're talking about Mesopotamia, which literally means the land between the rivers. And those rivers are the Tigris and Euphrates.
Right. And these weren't just any rivers. Every year they'd flood, and when they receded, they left behind this super rich silt. This created an area so fertile it became known as the Fertile Crescent.
So basically ideal conditions for farming, right?
Exactly. And that abundance of fertile land, that was key. It meant that, for the first time on a large scale, societies could produce more food than they needed to survive right away.
Yep.
They had surpluses.
They had leftovers.
Yes. And those leftovers, those agricultural surpluses, that was the magic ingredient. That's what allowed people to settle down in one place. It allowed them to build permanent homes, villages, and then eventually those villages grew into the first cities. You can't have specialized jobs or complex social structures or time for real innovation when everyone's just trying to find their next meal.
Right, it's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Got to get the basics down first.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've got these cities popping up, and that brings us to the Sumerians, right?
Right. If Mesopotamia is the cradle, the Sumerians were some of the first to really settle in and start building, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
And they did it with a revolutionary invention: cuneiform writing.
Okay, cuneiform. I remember that from school, those little wedge-shaped markings.
Exactly. But cuneiform wasn't just art. It was a huge technological leap. One of the first real writing systems anywhere in the world.
Huge is an understatement.
It is. Think about it. For most of human history, all knowledge, all stories were passed down orally.
Like a giant game of telephone.
Exactly. Things get distorted, details get lost. But cuneiform, that allowed them to record information permanently. Everything. How much grain they had, taxes, even myths and epic poems. Can you imagine trying to run a complex society or pass down important knowledge with just spoken words?
My brain hurts thinking about it. And speaking of running a society, that kind of leads us to the Babylonians, right? They're famous for their legal system.
Yes. Specifically, the Code of Hammurabi, one of the earliest and most complete examples of a written legal code we have. Now, their idea of justice wasn't always the same as ours. Some of the punishments seem pretty harsh today. But the big thing is they wrote it down. They had a defined set of rules for everyone, at least in theory.
Yeah, laws for thee, but not for me, that kind of thing.
Probably.
Yeah.
But it shows they were pretty sophisticated about governing.
Yeah.
And when you look closer at the laws, even the strange ones, you get this fascinating peek into Babylonian life. Their social hierarchies, their economy, even their worries and values. What stands out to you about this early legal system?
Honestly, I'm struck by how much it shows that basic human need for order, for rules, for structure. We crave that. It's not just a modern thing. It's been with us since the very beginning of complex societies.
I think you're right.
Now, to make all this ancient history a little more real, let's talk about King Gilgamesh.
Oh, yes.
This guy, his epic tale, it's more than just a dusty old story.
It's so much more. The Epic of Gilgamesh, it's thousands of years old, but it deals with timeless themes: friendship, loss, the fear of death, the search for meaning, even the desire for immortality. And what makes a good leader, it gives us incredible insight into their cultural values, their deepest fears.
Yeah.
And the craziest part is, those themes, they still resonate with us today. Why do you think that is? Why are these ancient anxieties still so relevant?
I think, well, maybe it's a reminder that some things, the really big questions, they never really change, do they? No matter how much time passes. We're all still trying to figure it out.
I think that's a good way to put it.
Okay, so we've got these kings, these stories, but then we have someone like Sargon of Akkad who took this idea of organization to a whole other level. This guy, he created one of the world's first empires.
That's right. And that was a huge shift in how power was organized.
Huge. It wasn't just a bunch of cities doing their own thing anymore.
It was a much bigger, more centralized unit. Sargon, he showed that you could bring all these independent regions together under one rule and create a more powerful, more unified state.
Yeah.
And that idea, the idea of building an empire, that had a huge ripple effect. It influenced everyone who came after, not just in that region, but around the world.
So, okay, we've got laws, we've got empires, but what about daily life? I mean, Mesopotamia wasn't all kings and conquests, right? What about everyday innovations, technologies that made life easier? Like, what about the wheel
Yeah.
or the plow?
Oh, you just hit on two of the most important inventions in human history. The wheel, well, we think they started using it for pottery, but then they quickly adapted it for carts, for chariots. It revolutionized transportation and warfare.
Yeah, try imagining a world without wheels.
Exactly. And then the plow, especially when they figured out how to use animals to pull it, that transformed agriculture. It
Yep.
meant they could produce even more food, which meant they could support larger populations.
There was a chain reaction, right?
Right. One innovation led to another. These might seem simple to us now, but they changed everything. And let's not forget their math skills. They developed this really complex base 60 number system. And you know what? We still use it today. That's where we get 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour.
Wow, and 360 degrees in a circle.
Yeah,
Mind-blowing.
isn't it? To think that these basic concepts we use every day originated thousands of years ago. It's incredible.
It is. You know, I was reading about the Sumerians, and I came across this really interesting, kind of quirky fact about their view of the universe. They thought it was flat.
Oh, yes. A flat disk surrounded by a dome made of tin.
It sounds like something out of a fantasy novel.
Right. But that's their early science, their attempt to understand the cosmos. It might seem simple to us now, but it shows the basic human need to make sense of the world around us.
To come up with some kind of explanation.
Exactly.
Speaking of understanding their world, I'm curious about the role of women in Mesopotamia. I've read that they weren't always just stuck at home.
That's a great point. It's true, it was a patriarchal society. But recent research shows that women had important roles, especially in religion. They were powerful priestesses, and some of their goddesses were super important in their beliefs.
So it's more complicated than we might think.
Much more. It's a good reminder that ancient societies weren't always so black and white.
Now, one last thing that really intrigued me was the idea that Mesopotamian mythology, especially the Epic of Gilgamesh, might have influenced later cultures. Like, there are hints of it in stories we all know.
That's a fascinating area of study. The themes in the epic, the flood, the hero's journey, they do pop up in later religious and literary traditions. It makes you wonder how stories travel, how ideas get passed down and transformed over centuries across cultures.
It's like a giant game of cultural telephone, but over thousands of years.
I like that.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, what would you say is the big takeaway for our listeners? Why does Mesopotamia matter?
To me, it's a testament to human ingenuity and adaptability. They faced a harsh environment with those unpredictable rivers, but they didn't just survive, they flourished. They invented tools, technologies, systems of organization, ways of thinking that still resonate today.
It's humbling, isn't it?
It is. And think about it. The basic principles behind our legal system, our administration, even the way we write, it all goes back to Mesopotamia. We take these things for granted, but they started there.
It makes you look at the world a little differently, doesn't it?
I think so. So as we finish our deep dive, I'm going to leave you with this thought. Look around. See if you can spot the echoes of Mesopotamian innovation in the modern world. Look for those challenges they faced: organization, communication, government, trying to understand the universe and see how we're still wrestling with those same issues today. We're building on a foundation that was laid thousands of years ago in the land between the rivers.
Wow. Okay, food for thought. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.